Hello everybody, and welcome back to Tier 2 ALR. My name is Aman, and you all join. And okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was live, but you all join me today for the Portuguese Grand Prix. It should be a very exciting race. 33 laps around this beautiful circuit, one of my personal favorites, honestly. Though I don't know if I share that same sentiment with a lot of the drivers. But looking at the drivers, let's discuss the standings very quickly. So currently, Bambino leads the championship with 162 points, with 71 points behind him is DDK in the Williams. In P3, we have Jaguar. In P4, we have Jim. And in P5, we have Trems. Jack, Said Al Falasi, Dax, Nikadza, and Jack Kings round off the rest of the top 10 in the driver standings. But looking at the constructors, on the other hand, Mercedes currently lead the championship with 172 points. We have Red Bull in P2 with 135, only 37 points behind the championship leaders. We have Williams in P3, followed by AlphaTauri in P4 and McLaren in P5. The rest of the top 10 would be Alpine, Ferrari, Haas, Aston Martin, and Alfa Romeo. So I think it's just a few more moments now until we wait for the rest of the grid to join up, and we should be getting started very, very soon. And of course, grab a loved one, grab your drink, maybe something to eat, and yeah, we should be starting qualifying very, very soon. Right, I have just gotten an update that Steba, Bambino, and Giulio will be joining us for the session, but they're going to be a few minutes late, 4 minutes specifically. So I apologize for the delay, everybody, but shouldn't be long now before we get the session started underway. So you know, I'm sure 4 minutes isn't, or in this case now 3 minutes are not gonna is not gonna hurt anybody. Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately a few of the drivers haven't been able to join as of yet, but we are getting the session underway. I'm sure they're going to be joining us on later on as time progresses. As I just say that Bambino has just actually managed to join the session right on time. Good on him. But yes, we should be getting the Portuguese Grand Prix started very, very soon. So let's talk a little bit about this track. So one of my personal favorites, massive elevation changes throughout the circuit, loads of overtaking opportunities. I'd argue it's one of the best circuits out on the calendar, but I'm sure I don't share the same sentiment with a lot of people. But for me personally, as a personal choice, I've always loved this track, and I think I'm excited to see some good racing in store for us today. So why not get the qualifying session started off with a bang, and hopefully we have a very competitive one at that. As I say that, we have another 30 seconds until until qualifying gets underway. But yes, a very high-speed circuit, a lot of fast corners around this track. We do have some good overtaking opportunities. Turn 1 may be subjected to a few incidents. I wouldn't be surprised to see so, as it is a very fast left-hander. But I'm sure at the start, I'm sure turn 1, lap 1 is going to give us some pretty exciting racing as we head into the start of the race. But regardless, we have now gotten the qualifying session underway. So while I have the opportunity to, if my screen would load kindly, there we go. Let me get my telemetry set up and we should be all good. There does seem to be a few clouds in the area, which could signify some rain later on in this qualifying session, so drivers should be eager to go out as soon as they possibly can to hopefully settle out before it's too late. And as of now, we haven't seen any activity in the garages. It doesn't look like any of the drivers as of yet have decided to go out as they load up their setups and fuel up their cars to the appropriate amounts. Okay, so it took a little bit of time, but there's been some activity in the McLaren garage. As you'll see the McLaren car drive past us any second. Oh, never mind, it's already way out ahead and about to get onto the track. So we're right on board with that, and it seems to be Prezemu who's going to be the first driver out on the grid at the moment, and hopefully we'll be setting the first time lap here at Portugal, and we'll ride on board with him to get an idea of what this track has in store for us. So obviously 2 DRS zones. The second one being not nearly as long as the first, however, it is still granted long enough to present a load of overtaking opportunities, especially into this hairpin corner right here, where I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot of late lunges being sent into this corner. So again, one of those tracks which presents a lot of great overtaking opportunities, but this is a place where a lot of drivers struggle on this uphill right-hander, where it's so easy to lose traction with the car and just spin out. But luckily on this occasion we can see Prezemu keeping his car stable, followed by this immediate fast double right-hander, and meeting that apex perfectly is the most difficult thing to do, but I'm sure in his outlap he isn't really looking forward to meeting any of the apexes. He's just trying to warm up his tires as he's now coming towards the final bend before the second last bend before the start-finish straight. And we should be going over the detection point now, and now we ride on board with Prezemu as he approaches the line and is about to begin the first time lap here at the Portuguese Grand Prix. Riding on board with him as he heads towards turn 1, obviously DRS flap wide open. This is that fast right-hander we were talking about earlier, followed by this extremely almost hairpin-esque corner, which is immediately before the second DRS straight. And riding on board with him, he does obviously set a purple Sector 1 at 22.1, being the first driver to go through Sector 1 with an officially timed lap. And riding on board with Prezemu, let's see what sort of times he can put up for us. He isn't, I'll have to double check if he's fighting near the top of the standings for the championship. Goes through that corner very nice and stably, and now coming towards the end of Sector 2, manages to set a 52.3. Now with only 2 more bends left to go, let's see what sort of times Prezemu can set for us. There is a Haas behind him, so we'll switch on board to him. I think that might be Samet. But Presema now with DRS wide open, coming across the line, managing to set a 117.4, setting the baseline for a lot of these other drivers. As now Samet goes off the track, but luckily it doesn't invalidate his lap time. Coming through the final bend, DRS now almost wide open, coming across the line, sets a 117.4, only 5/100ths behind Samet and Jaguar in the Red Bull, managing to set a 117.0, managing to take provisional pole at the current moment. Saeed Al Falasi being another driver who's currently out on a time run, comes across the line with a 117.8, unfortunately 8/10ths off of provisional pole. And I'm sure he's going to be looking to improve throughout the rest of the circuit. Now, riding on board with the Aston Martin of Zab. He's currently almost towards the end of Sector 2. Let's see what sort of times he's pushing through there. 52.3, no purple sectors for him. However, with only a few more corners to go, let's see if he can try to introduce some fighting chances for himself near the front of the grid. As a bunch of other drivers have now begun their time lapse, Nikudza and the Haas being the other driver who's just started his run. And Zab now with DRS wide open, coming across the line, sets a 117.6, manages to propel himself into P4. And Nikudza currently out on his timed run, approaching the DRS zone. Coming towards the end of Sector 1, what are the times? A 122.129, that is a purple Sector 1. Pretty decent lap from him so far. Obviously, though, there's still so much room to just mess up on a circuit like this. It's so easy to make those kind of mistakes. Luckily for us, we haven't experienced any rain as of yet, and it looks like most of the drivers will be able to set a time on the softs before the rain, if there is any rain, comes in. So, luckily for us, we're doing pretty good in that department. Coming towards the end of Sector 2, and he sets a 51.9, which is also a purple Sector 2. Nikudza absolutely flying through the circuit right now. Coming through the last few bends around the circuit. Will he be able to take provisional pole? Provisional pole being a 117.0. There's a very good chance that he could go into the 116s here. DRS wide open. He comes across the line and manages to set a 117.1. Just barely missing out by 6/1000ths of a second on provisional pole. Not too sure where he must have made that mistake. It was through Sector 1 and 2 that he did get purple sectors. Seems like Sector 3 was the cause for his downfall. However, riding on board with Trends with a 51.926 through Sector 2, he's absolutely flying in the Red Bull as well. He would love to join his teammate near the front of the grid. And speaking of Red Bull joining him joining his teammate at the front of the grid, Red Bull have been fantastic through the season. Even though obviously Bambino's been basically carrying Mercedes on his back, but Red Bull have a very decent chance of fighting for the championship as he comes across the line with a 117.039. All drivers very, very close together on this occasion. However, it makes you wonder, never mind. Bambino actually, I believe, beginning his timed run now. For a second there, I thought he messed up his run, but now riding on board with Alu, who is ahead of Bambino at the moment and on a timed run himself, coming towards the end of about halfway through Sector 2. Both the Red Bull drivers securing P1 and P2 at the current moment. And as Alu has a massive moment through that corner. He does get a purple Sector 2. However, through that massive moment there, he must have lost a ton of time. However, I think he is still going to try to complete his lap to see what sort of times he can post up. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't get provisional pole here. But if he does, it just goes to show you how much of a mega lap he was on to begin with. Alu now coming towards the line. What sort of times will he be able to set? Unfortunately, through that incident, he sets a 117.4, and it looks like that mistake did heavily cost him as he slots himself into P6. Keeping our eye on Jack Kings now in the McLaren. He is coming towards the end of Sector 2. 53.6, not a very competitive time from him at the moment. See Presema right behind him on an outlap of his own. 10 minutes to go in the session now. And Jack Kings comes across the line, sets a 124.1. Not a very competitive lap time for him at all, but he is giving his teammate that slipstream advantage and gets out of the way right before turn 1. So you know Presema is going to be going on a mega lap himself. Obviously needs to get that 4/10 improvement if he's looking to fight for provisional pole. And maybe that little boost that he got from his teammate might have just been enough to push him over the edge. We'll have to see, as there is a yellow flag in Sector 2. Seems to be the Alpine of Alu, getting out of the way for the Williams. Oh, I'm sorry, I completely missed that as I was looking at the timing sheets. Prezemo unfortunately loses the car and drives straight off into the grass there. That's going to completely destroy his tires, and that's going to be the end of his timed run. So he's most likely going to be going into the pits at the end of this lap. Looking on the other hand, Bambino unfortunately invalidates his run, but will be going for a second attempt here. Feels like he has enough ERS and enough life in those tires to maybe continue going for his runs. Heading down towards Sector 1. Fast right-hander, keeps it nice and tight. He does not lose the car whatsoever. And now approaching the DRS zone. He has to make sure he gets an absolutely beautiful run here to maximize the speeds out of his corners. And he has now, coming towards Sector 1, managed to set a 22.2. No purple Sector 1s for him. Obviously, no competitive lap time from him either. It seems like Bambino is struggling with keeping the car out on track. And I can only assume that's the only possible reason as to why he hasn't been able to set a lap time for himself at the moment. Coming through Sector 2, 52.3. Once again, no purple sectors for Bambino. Our championship leader seems to be struggling on this occasion. There are 7 minutes and 30 seconds left to go in this qualifying session, so there's a ton of time for him to make a comeback, and I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to bolt right into the pits. He does have his flashing red light on, and it doesn't look like Bambino's going to be completing his run as he invalidates his lap time once again and chooses to go for another run on the softs. So it seems like the softs are capable of going for multiple runs in a row here. Jack King's, on the other hand, roughly 2.7 seconds or 2.5 seconds up on his previous lap time. With the entirety, with only a few more corners left to go. I thought he had a bit more time than that. A flashing red light at the back of his car as well as he comes towards the line and sets a 1:19.2. He is 2.8 seconds faster than his previous lap time. However, it's not good enough to put him on provisional pole at the moment. Still back down in P10. Right on board with Nikudza. He is currently in P3 and on a roll, heading towards the end of Sector 2. Does he have any purple sectors? Yes, he does. Almost 100th up, almost 200th up on his previous lap time. Still not enough to fight for provisional pole, though. Coming through these final few corners, let's see if he can make he actually meets those apexes very nicely. And now watching his straight run, it's completely flat out from here towards the line. He's absolutely sending it as close to the line as possible to minimize the amount of time it takes to get there, and gets a 1:17.035, 4,000th faster than Trems, and manages to take provisional pole away from the Red Bull team. Fantastic lap from him. Samet, on the other hand, unfortunately at the moment down on his current lap time. Seido Falassi, however, also invalidated his run. Zabs as well. Oh, and Jack King's having his struggles with currently in P10. Unfortunately spins out once more. Larry Julio, on the other hand, currently in P11. Mercedes driver would like to assist his teammate and try to contribute his part into the championship as well. Manages to set a purple Sector 1 with a 22.245, I believe it was. Not entirely too sure as I didn't catch that properly. There's only 5 minutes and 30 seconds left to go in this session. Oh, I was about to say he meets that apex absolutely beautifully, but he does lose. There was a little bit of a snap of oversteer there. Luckily, he does correct himself and doesn't lose control of his car. Larry now basically towing his teammate along with him, who has unfortunately invalidated his run. Bambino, and the struggles for Bambino on the soft tires continues as he's still on 5 laps on those old softs. Now Blurry coming across the line, he sets a 1:17.6. Still 6/10 off of pole position, but he does manage to secure himself in P9, and Bambino has unfortunately retired from the session. That's going to be the end of his runs. I believe that he may have had a penalty or something. I can't seem to understand why he would struggle that much, but that's 1:17.061 for Jaguar. So P1 and P1 till P4 all separated by roughly a tenth. That is a fantastically close grid. We're in store for what should be some pretty exciting racing today. Granted how close the field is together at the moment. Even, normally you'd see like a 1.5, 1 second disparity from P1 to I don't know, P1 to P6, P7-ish. But now we can see almost all the drivers within a second of each other, excluding Jack Kings at the moment, who's, I'm sure, going to improve as the session continues, though. He should probably hurry considering there's only 4 minutes left to go. You can see Jack in the Williams currently currently going on a very slow lap of his own, trying to conserve his fuel and energy so that by the time he gets to the line he can go for quite possibly another run. And Persemu currently out on has gone off the track, unfortunately. Makes you wonder, like, both the McLaren drivers are massively struggling for traction and grip through some of these corners as the horrors for the McLaren team continue. And as most of the drivers now come back into the pits, they're going to be lining themselves up for what should be their final runs here in qualifying. At the current moment, Nikudza still standing in provisional pole with a 117.035. Trem's only 4 thousandths behind him. And Steba and Jaguar right there in the conversation as well. So it's a four-way fight for pole position. Let's see who can secure it. Currently, Alu is on a run. And unfortunately, 200s down, 200s up on his current lap time. So it's definitely going to be looking to hopefully improve through as the lap continues. Ooh, a bit of oversteer there as well. But luckily for Alu, he is up on his current lap time, almost by half a tenth at the moment. He's going to have to keep it nice and steady if he wants to show any signs of improvement. Only 2 minutes left to go in the circuit. Oh, and just as I say that, Alu once again loses control of his car and goes nearly off the track there. Luckily, he doesn't spin out and damage those tires even more. And he decides to send it straight into the pit wall. And that's going to be the end of Alu's run. Not too sure why he did that. Could have gone for another run possibly. Persemu, on the other hand, out on a run of his own at the moment. Approaching the end of Sector 2. Sets a 52.2. Currently 7 tenths up on his time. 7 hundredths up on his time. And the snap of oversteer really harming Persemu as once again the McLaren driver loses traction and goes completely off the track there. The horrors for the McLaren team really are continuing here. I saw Jaguar was just about to start his time run, in which should be most likely his final run here in qualifying with only 1 minute and 20 left to go in the session. So let's ride on board with him and see what sort of times he can set up as he slows ever so down and gently goes on the throttle going up this uphill. As Jack, seemingly out of nowhere with a 116.6, manages to take provisional pole by a storm. 4 tenths faster than Nikudza is. So it should be interesting to see how Jaguar combats this. Obviously, at the moment, it doesn't look like he's lighting the timing sheets up ablaze, but currently being in P5 and only 4 tenths down on provisional pole, there's a very good chance that he will massively improve here. And now coming towards the end of Sector 2. Jaguar, unfortunately, up on his current lap time. It's going considerably slower. It doesn't look like he has enough battery to make a full, complete run once again. So that's going to be most likely the end for Jaguar. Let's see if he can maybe improve through these final few bends and hopefully improve his positioning as he comes across the line and sets for himself a 117.1. And unfortunately, Jaguar will not be improving on this occasion. I want to see just to make sure Nikudza isn't ahead of anybody else. Steba now seems to be the next driver who's going to be coming across the line as qualifying time has run out. So whatever times drivers set for themselves now will be it. And Steba, on the other hand, almost 3.5 tenths up on his previous lap time. Granted that he keeps this pace up, there's a very good chance he will be fighting for pole position. Coming through the final few bends now. The Alfa Romeo Steva now coming through the final corner is most likely going to try to keep the car as right as possible to minimize the amount of time, and he decides to abandon his lap and just goes and parks himself on the pit on the route to the pits. And Trems comes across the line and manages to secure pole position with a 1:16.664, a fantastic lap time from him. Not too sure why Steva disqualified himself through the session there. Unfortunately, Jack is not going to be improving once again, and Jaguar, who does seem to be on another run, I don't think he's going to be lighting the timing sheets up significantly. He does seem to be down on his previous lap time as well. And most likely Jaguar is going to be coming into the pits and will have abandoned his lap. Oh no, yep, there it is. He's going to come into the pits. So ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be the end of qualifying. Congratulations to Trems and the Red Bull for securing pole position. Jack in P2, Nikudze in P3. We got Jaguar, the Red Bull teammate, in P4, and Samet, the Haas teammate, in P5. Rest of the top 10 would be Blurry, Przemu, Alu, Zab, and Saeed. Right then, ladies and gentlemen, we're all set to get the Portuguese Grand Prix underway, and as we can see, those dark clouds that were looming over the track during qualifying have translated into rain here in the actual race. A bit of a curveball for a few of the drivers. I'm sure they had most of their setups accustomed to the dry conditions, but I think regardless, we should be in store for some good racing here today. As I think it's only a few more moments now before we get the Grand Prix underway, so I guess we'll just wait. Right then, it's been a very interesting qualifying session. There's 5 red lights. It's lights out and away we go here at the Portuguese Grand Prix. We can see Jack almost got off to a very nice start. Unfortunately, he can't catch up to Trems. And now Nikudze around the outside trying to make a move on the Williams driver. He does send it around the outside. They're neck and neck with each other for P2 at the moment. Jack with the inside line trying to send it down the inside of Nikudze. And it does manage to work for him as he does seem to secure the position. As there's been a massive incident involving multiple drivers in the back there. Przemu, Samet, Blurry all dropping down significant amounts of positions. As we can see, Trems pulling away significantly, and now Nikudze sends it down the inside of Jack and manages to make the overtake stick as both drivers go extremely wide there, and that compromises Jack heavily as Jaguar now with the inside line trying to catch up, unfortunately cannot do so as he's extremely close to Jack, as there may have been a small bit of contact between the drivers there. Luckily everybody escapes at the front of the grid without any incidents. However, that was a very, very big incident at the back there, as I'm sure we'll be seeing maybe a possible report at the end of the race. And the spray being absolutely kicked up into the air for a few of these drivers. And now we can see Steva catching up to Jaguar ever so slowly. Made up a significant amount of positions as he looks towards the inside line, looking to make a possible overtake. However, thinks better of it. However, that does open the window for Bambino as well, who's now basically pushing the Alfa Romeo of Steva along. So lap 1 of 33 here around Portugal. And it was a very intense lap one, to say the least. You can see Steba only 2/10 behind Jaguar at the moment. You can see the fastest lap obviously being set by Trems at the moment. And now heading down towards turn 1, we can see just how much faster Steba felt like he was through that corner as compared to Jaguar. But unfortunately, he's too far back at the moment to send a move. However, that does not seem to be stopping Bambino at the moment, who is eager to get past him as soon as he possibly can. We may be looking at a few positions being changed over here as now Nikudza and Jack once again come into battle with each other. Jack this time with the inside line manages to make the move stick. Nikudza goes slightly wide and they're still side by side through that corner. Jack now pulling up ahead and manages to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P2. Fantastic racing between both these drivers as Jack now comes out ahead and has to close that 1.6 second gap to Trems. Looking a bit down the grid, we can see Bambino still pushing Steba along here, waiting for an opportunity to present itself where he can make an overtake. Bambino obviously starting off near the end of the grid, made up a massively significant amount of positions, trying to go around the outside of Steba. Unfortunately, can't seem to do so at the moment. However, has he lined himself up with a good run heading into turn 1? We'll have to see, as a little bit of a lift is required through that corner. And look at that speed Bambino has. Unfortunately, the slipstream advantage sticks to everyone. And now as we can look at the front of the grid, Jaguar and Nikudza now coming into a battle. And Jaguar, before the corner even begins, manages to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P3. You know, this battle is very far from over at the moment, as we do have another long straight right ahead of us, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Nikudza maybe send it down the inside of the Red Bull driver again, as Nikudza unfortunately loses control of his car and spins out. And now Steba and Bambino coming into a battle of themselves. Bambino brakes extremely late and there's massive amounts of contact between the Mercedes and the Alfa Romeo. Hopefully the Mercedes comes out of it without any damage, but unfortunately Bambino unable to make the move stick and has to compromise and stay behind in P5 at the moment. It's extremely rough to see the Haas of Nikudza spin out, as he had a really great qualifying session and did manage to, you know, fight through the grid and, well, not fight through the grid, but managed to keep his position very nicely. Unfortunately, that's going to be the end of, not going to be the end of his race, but that does significantly hinder his chances to finish high up in this race. We're heading on board with Jaguar now. It doesn't seem like Jack's even beginning to catch Trems at the moment, as the gap has increased from 1.6 seconds to 2.3, and Bambino and Steba now once again coming into a battle. Bambino desperately trying to get past the Alfa Romeo. I think this is maybe the battle to see. As we can see, there's a battle going up ahead and up ahead, as well as Jaguar now trying to close the gap to Jack. Heading down towards turn 1, using that slipstream advantage to his benefit, and now heading down towards turn 1. Jaguar, will he get the move done before the corner even begins? It looks like he will. We saw Jack trying to maybe go for a potential switchback. Unfortunately, he can't get the move done and has to stick behind Jaguar now, as it's a Red Bull 1-2. And this has to be some fantastic defending from Steba if Bambino's unable to get past him at this current moment. Both drivers being a bit too far back with each other. We can see Nikudza getting past Prezemu without any ease, without any issues. And only has his teammate Samet ahead of him now. Saeed getting past Zab. There's a battle going on here for P6 at the moment. A three-way fight by the looks of it. Alu and Saeed both sandwiching the Aston Martin, and Alu pushing that Aston Martin along, basically bump drafting it. Unfortunately, he can't seem to get past him at the moment. Looking to maybe go around the outside. Oh, he switches back towards the inside line. A fantastic move from Alu. A very, very late switch back from him. Luckily, it's completely safe, and he does manage to make the overtake beautifully, as it's now an Alpine P6 and 7. And oh, Zab goes massively off the track. Probably misses his braking point and loses out of position to Jack Kings, unfortunately, and drops down to P9. Looking at the front of the grid, we can see it's a three-way fight for P4 at the moment, as Steva basically drifting through that corner. Now side by side with Jack. Bambino very closely behind him, has a brilliant view to this battle, as it's 3 wide heading into turn 1. And now Steva and Bambino both getting past Jack. Bambino trying to break later and trying to go around the outside of Steva. Unfortunately, can't get the move done. And now Steva and Bambino currently sitting in P3 and 4, and Jack unfortunately drops down to P5. So the top 5 extremely close to each other. Jaguar doing a wonderful job of pulling away from P3 as Jack is struggling for grip on those intermediate tires. Bambino now look towards the inside line to make a potential overtake. Unfortunately, a bit too far back as there is a bit of contact between him and the Alfa Romeo Steba. However, it doesn't look like there was any damage from that, thankfully. So we bring our attention a bit down the grid, and we can see Samet is extremely close to Zabs at the moment. Looking for any sort of opportunity that presents itself. Obviously, it seems like there's 2 separate races going on at the moment, and both the Alpines currently in no man's land between both these groups that have seemed to form out on track at the moment. And now then heading down towards turn 1 as there's a bit of some interesting racing going on here between Jack Kings and Nikudza. Both the McLaren driver actually managing to get past Nikudza pretty easily, which is a bit shocking to see, but Nikudza not done just as yet, sticking it right behind the McLaren, trying to build up that slipstream so that he can get past him as soon as possible. And now we can see the run heading down towards turn 1. Obviously Alu and Said very close together out on track as well. It doesn't look like they're going to be switching positions, as Samet and Zab are actually having a battle of their own, and Samet manages to make the move stick before the corner begins and promotes himself up into P8. It seems like everywhere you look, there's some sort of action going on, as Jack Kings, unfortunately, the horrors of qualifying continue on into the race, and Jack Kings unfortunately goes off the track and loses a significant amount of positions and drops down into P13. I mean, we all know what tires everybody else is on, but most interestingly enough, Bambino moving up 8 positions and Steba moving up 10 positions. Considerable gain for both these drivers at the moment. Looking a bit further back, we can see Nikudza now getting very close together with Zab once again. As he's basically pushing this Aston Martin along. He's trying to find any sort of window for overtaking, but unfortunately, if mistakes like that continue, Nikudza is not going to be able to get past Zab very easily. Once again, losing traction on the exit of those corners, and unfortunately, luckily for him, it doesn't ruin his run heading into turn 1 there, as the Haas does seem extremely squarely through those high-speed corners. Doesn't look like it's handling the wet conditions very, very well. And now Nikudza pulls out to the inside line, now heading down towards turn 1, and does manage to make the move, does manage to complete the move before the corner begins and promotes himself up into P9. And now we can see a significant gap beginning to form between P1 to P6. Seems like everybody's beginning to space themselves out pretty decently. However, with these rainy and wet conditions and the rain still falling down out on track, I wouldn't be surprised to see some more track changes, and that presenting some more challenges for these drivers as the race continues. As we have a yellow flag in Sector 2, and Jack unfortunately retires from the session. I'm not too sure why, and we can see that he has absolutely no front wing on his car. No safety car out at the moment, and that's going to be the end of Jack's race, who was unfortunately driving a very great, fantastic race, fighting near the front of the grid, but that is going to be the end of his race as he retires and falls down into P13. I'm very surprised that there wasn't a safety car out on track. It would have been nice to have one, as it would have brought the grid much, much closer together. And at the moment, the closest battle out on track seems to be between Blurry and Perzemu at the moment, P10 to P11. This is obviously the battle for the final points position on the grid. And it is only lap 8 of 33. And just as I say that, Nikudza has actually closed the gap significantly to his own teammate. There seems to be a driver swap. Yes, there is. Nikudza does get let through by his teammate very nicely and very considerately. I'm sure he would have appreciated if it was a bit further back and instead of heading into turn 1 like this. However, a safe move is always wanted between teammates, but as long as there's no incident, I'm sure it's not really a big deal. Now, Nikudza currently in P7, 4.2 seconds behind Saeed Al Falasi. We know Nikudza has the speed to be up near the front of the grid, so we'll keep an eye on him and his timing sheets as he's already beginning to bring that gap down. 4 seconds now being the gap to P6 at the moment. The gap between Steva, Bambino, Jaguar, and Trems all seems to be the same, roughly 2 seconds separating each driver individually from each other. Fortunately, in a race like this, as I say that, actually, never mind, Blurry almost completely losing control of his car there. Prezemu, Blurry, and Jag Kings have all seemed to have the same issue of just not having enough grip out on track. Both the McLaren drivers obviously struggling setup-wise, and Blurry also unable to keep up with, or managing to get past them, but alas, that is how it goes sometimes. I'm sure some of these drivers had come into this race prepared with only dry setups and they weren't anticipating any rain or didn't really have much practice in the rain to begin with. I think that's what separates having a good driver from a great driver, is the way you can adapt yourself depending on the weather and depending on the conditions as the race progresses. Not to say Blurry, Prezemu, and Jack Kings obviously aren't great drivers. They're incredible. They're faster than I am. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in Tier 2. But Blurry now 4/10 behind Prezemu. This is the closest battle out on track at the moment. He's just unable to catch up to him under that slipstream as well, unable to get past him. Thinks about looking down the inside, but I think it was very obvious that he was too far back to make any sort of lunges and any sort of moves. However, if he can line himself up very nicely here, he may be looking at a potential overtake at the end of the straight. Granted, Prezemu makes a mistake of his own. And now, will Blurry send it down the inside? No, he will not. Would have been too far back of a lunge to make, and he decides to avoid risking a potential incident there. Oh, as Prezemu unfortunately loses control of his car and unfortunately spins out. That does promote Blurry and Jag Kings up into P10 and P11 respectively. And as we wait for Prezemu to bring his car over the crest there, unfortunately for him, he does lose a significant amount of time to the rest of the grid. He's not going to be happy with himself after a mistake like that. And unfortunately, that is going to be the closest battle on track for a little bit of time at the moment. I guess the only thing we can really expect to see now are any sort of incidents or anything as such that would cause a safety car or the grid to bunch up with each other. But interestingly enough, Nikudza now in lap 11 of 33 deciding to come into the pits. What is the strategy here? Him and Blurry Julio both. Him and Zab both, actually. So what is Nikudza cooking as he comes into the pits? Is he going to switch on to another set of intermediates? Yes, he is in lap 11 of 33. No front wing change, so it's just simple. It's just a simple pit stop. And the same goes for Zabs as well, who's also switched on to another set of intermediates. Ooh, I thought I viewed some interesting action over here as Jag Kings has actually closed the gap to Blurry significantly. 7.5 tenths separating P9 and P8. As Blurry picks up a 3-second time penalty for track invalidations, as we just saw him go off track. Unfortunately, that is going to cost him heavily, and that gap between him and the McLaren driver now all of a sudden seemingly becoming a lot closer now. 5 tenths now separating him and Blurry. Jack King's trying to keep his car as close to the Mercedes as possible, but obviously under these wet conditions and granted also how much he's been struggling for traction, that dirty air must certainly not be helping, but we're right on board with him regardless as he comes over the crest and heads down the start-finish straight. Will Jack Kings be able to catch him? And unfortunately not, as he decides to slow down and go straight into the pits to switch off of his intermediates and onto another set of inters. Luckily for Blurry, he can relax a bit easy now, knowing that the McLaren behind him has gone into the pits. However, he does need to keep his pace up consistently if he doesn't want to get undercut by the McLaren team, of course. As Nikita actually does get past Jack Kings, who wasn't for his pit stop earlier. And Zab as well. Unfortunately, Jack Kings drops down to P12. And at the moment, none of the front runners or nobody in the top 9 has come in for their pit stops at the moment. Trems and Jaguar both currently leading the race and being in P1 and P2 respectively. And the gap actually coming down between Trems and Jaguar, 1.5 seconds now separating both these drivers. It was earlier on in the race we saw 2.5 seconds, so maybe some sort of incident involving Trems or him losing a bit of control in his car has brought him back down as Steva goes significantly wide there off the track. Luckily, it looks like he managed to avoid getting a penalty at the moment. Lap 13 of 33 as we're over a third of a way through this Grand Prix. You see Nikadza actually catching up to Przemu now. Przemu obviously being on those 10 lap older intermediate tires. Nikadza will just be having that much more grip through these corners as now they head towards turn 1, and Nikadza actually does set for himself the fastest time of the race, a 1:25.4, heading down towards turn 1. Unfortunately too far back to make a lunge on the McLaren driver at the moment, but you can just see how much more grip Nikadza has as compared to Przemu, basically pushing that McLaren along, and the first chance he's gonna get, he's gonna absolutely steam past this driver. As we can see now, Nikadza unfortunately unable to get the traction out of that corner, very surprisingly, and Przemu actually pulling away, heading towards this hairpin. Parks his car in the middle of the track to minimize the overtaking opportunities for Nikadza. But now coming through this corner, Nikadza now going around the outside, going side by side with Przemu, with the inside line now, manages to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P9. Great racing from him, from both drivers, to avoid getting into an incident there. I know it's not easy to avoid an incident in those fast right-handers, but luckily for them, they actually do so very nicely. And now we can see Jaguar, who was currently in P2 or P1, I believe, I'm not too sure, does come into the pits to switch onto his intermediate tires and becomes one of the first few of the front runners to actually come in and switch his tire compounds. We'll see what sort of snowball effects this causes for the rest of the grid, as Samet also avoids going into the pit at the moment. Will Blurry do the same? Yes, he will. So now we can see Bambino actually closing the gap to Steva, only a second separating him and the Alfa Romeo. Almost a second life being taken into Bambino as he's significantly beginning to gain on the Alfa Romeo. We saw the gap between all drivers was roughly 2 seconds. It's good to see some action coming back into this race now. And obviously we saw how Jaguar went into the pits a lap earlier. Will Trent follow suit and maybe try to copy his teammate in the following lap? I wouldn't be surprised if that is the strategy for Red Bull. As you can see, Trent's taking a significantly tighter line, and he does decide to head into the pits. Will Steva follow him or stay out? Steva decides to stay out, and Steva decides to go in for the pits as well, and Bambino decides to stay out, and for the current moment does get promoted into P1. So let's take a look at Jaguar now, who is getting past Samet at the moment. Unfortunately for him, he would have wanted to avoid any sort of traffic, but luckily it doesn't look like it's held him up significantly. Jaguar now coming down the pit straight. Will he be able to get past his teammate Trems? Let's take a look here. It doesn't look like it's going to be much of a challenge. Actually, it looks like it's going to be significantly closer than I thought it was going to be. Trems comes out ahead. Jaguar currently right behind him, and Steva comes out in P5. So at the current moment, Bambino in P1 has not come in for a stop, and neither has Saeed in P2. Could they possibly be holding out for a potential safety car? We'll have to see. As both the Red Bulls now sticking very closely together. And as long as they can, as there's a yellow flag in Sector 1, there's a McLaren parked out on track. It does seem to be Prezemu as he is losing positions. And then he loses another to his teammate there. Still no safety car. Lap 15 of 33, only just under halfway through this race. And now Bambino decides to come into the pits and unfortunately picks up a speeding penalty in the pit lane. 5 seconds will be added on into his timing sheets unless he can come in for another pit stop to remove that 5 seconds. And now, let's take a look at where Bambino comes out. Obviously, we saw Trems and Jaguar coming in very, very closely together. Saeed, and it doesn't look like it's going to be much of a competition. Saeed gets past him, Trems gets past him, Jaguar goes through, and now Stable also looks to be coming through and promotes himself ahead of Bambino. So it doesn't look like much has changed here as Blurry Julio and once again picks up a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So both Mercedes drivers, funnily enough, picking up penalties of their own. But what's interesting enough is that Saeed is unfortunately not going to be really able to do anything to stop these Red Bulls from getting past him on this occasion as he goes a bit wide heading out of the exit of that corner, and that allows both Jaguar and Trems to come through very, very easily. Saeed unfortunately dropping down into P3 now. Has significantly older tires as compared to the rest of the grid, so he's definitely going to be most likely coming in for his pit stop very, very soon, as Staba now is also beginning to close the gap to the Alpine, and now we can see Staba actually not wasting any time whatsoever, sends it down the inside of Saeed, and luckily avoids a massive collision there. Saeed now drops down into P4. Staba obviously realizing this is a great opportunity to catch up to these Red Bulls that have seemingly been pulling away from him for most of the session, and now within a second of P3 at the moment as Staba gets a bit squirrely on the exit of that corner and does significantly lose time to Jaguar. We're looking to gain that right back with the slipstream, and now we can see Saeed bolting right into the pits for his pit stop of the race, and Bambino now getting promoted up into P4. Alu actually setting the fastest time of the race so far with a 1:24.9. Impressive lap time from him, and Staba actually closing this gap to Jaguar very significantly. Now 7/10 separating him and the Red Bull driver. Things are beginning to get very, very interesting here in the latter half of this race. This is just one of those things that we were talking about. It's obviously, you know, it's difficult to drive in the rain to begin with. And now we can see Staba trying to do the switchback, trying to get the move done. Has his tires right next to the Red Bull. And it looks like Jaguar is going to have to do as great of a defending as he possibly can to prevent this Alfa Romeo from going through. Staba now with the inside line manages to make the move stick and does promote himself up into P2. But obviously Jaguar not letting him through just as yet. Has to make sure that he keeps up with himself so that his teammate can pull away with the win. Jaguar now sticking right behind the Alfa Romeo, is going to try to keep it as close to him as possible, heading down towards turn 1. And now we can see Jaguar slowly gaining on the Alfa Romeo. Will he send it down into turn 1? He's a bit far back on this occasion, but he is slowly gaining. And unfortunately, Jaguar a bit too far back and will be unable to recapture that position. Stays in P3 at the moment. Great move from Staba, sending it in a place where I don't think Jaguar was really expecting him to make a move, and promotes himself up into P2. However, the job is far from finished. 3.5 tenths separating P2 and P3 at the moment. And Jaguar, unfortunately, too far back to make a lunge and has to stay in P3 at the moment. And now we can begin to see Staba slowly beginning to actually pull away from Jaguar and is now beginning to close the gap to Trems. Some interesting racing going on near the end of the grid as we can see Saeed now closing the gap to Zabs. Probably most likely going to have to send it down the inside, and he does get the move done before the corner even begins. With the inside line, manages to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P8. And this is where things are looking to go from bad to worse for Jaguar as he loses the position to Steba, and obviously is now beginning to lose time to the car in front of him. But what's worse for him at the moment is that Bambino, who is currently in P4 and does have a 5-second penalty to keep in mind, has now closed the gap to him. Obviously Bambino being on a set of fresher tires at the moment, and Jaguar massively catching up to Steba, and through that straight there brings that gap back up between him and Bambino. Most likely used his battery there to give him that extra top speed. Four tenths separating him and Steba. But what this is doing for Steba is that it's significantly increasing that gap to him from him to P1 at the moment. Obviously having to deal with Jaguar in his rearview mirrors isn't helping. 2 seconds separating him from P1 now. And Bambino only 3.5 tenths behind Jaguar at the moment. Now we're right on board with Bambino. As he gets extremely squarely on the exit of that corner. Luckily for him, he does make the recovery and doesn't lose his car there, but he's still sticking with Jaguar. Basically pushing this Red Bull along, trying to force him into some sort of mistake there, and now looking towards taking that inside line, sticks right behind Jaguar to maximize his speed, heading towards the start-finish straight. Unfortunately, running out of room on the track to maybe go side by side with him. We can see Jaguar now under this on the right side with the inside line, actually gaining on Bambino. Bambino around the outside, trying to make the move stick. They're side by side now, heading towards the next corner. Bambino around the outside, trying to get the move done. Unfortunately, cannot. Decides to go for the switchback. Jaguar goes extremely wide there. Now Bambino around the outside manages to make the move stick. They're still side by side with each other, and the battle is far from over. But Jaguar, unfortunately, does not have the great traction out of that corner, and unfortunately loses out on another position. Drops down to P3. A great set of driving there between Bambino and Jaguar, and Bambino now promotes himself up into P3. However, he still does have that 5-second penalty, which will hinder him at the end of this race if he can't seem to lose Jaguar quickly enough. 13 laps left to go now in this race. Samit, on the other hand, near the end of the grid, 6 tenths separating him and Zab. We saw Saeed get past Zab earlier, and now it seems like Jack Kings also has done the same. Samit seems to be wanting to be next on that list for getting past the Aston Martin. Well, what's interesting is Bambino already has a 1.7 second advantage to Jaguar, and has already brought his gap to Steba down by 7 tenths. And just as Steba had begun to gain on the Red Bull driver ahead of him, he's already having to worry in his rearview mirrors of the championship leader. He doesn't look like he's ready to relent up anytime soon. Samit getting very close to Zab, and now already getting past him on the straight. Not much of a fight back from Zab, as it doesn't seem like he was really ready to do anything there. He is on significantly old intermediates as compared to the rest of the grid. Currently his tires are 10 laps old at the moment. And now looking back near the front of the grid, Bambino 3.5 tenths now behind Steba, has brought that gap down significantly. 2.3 seconds to Jaguar, who he only overtook like a lap ago. I was talking about how if Bambino's going to be able to lose Jaguar to nullify his 5-second penalty, and it looks like he's not going to have any issues doing so. Granted, he keeps up the pace that he's going at the moment. The battle for second place being the closest battle out on track at the moment. 11 laps left to go. We are 2/3 through this race now. And Nikudza comes in for once again another pit stop. Currently in P6 on 10 lap old intermediates. Decides to come in for one more stop. Most likely trying to maximize his output that he can give in this race. Will have to heavily rely on a safety car if he's looking to fight near the front of the grid. But even then, I feel like if a safety car was to come out, I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of the front runners also bolting straight for the pits as well. Bambino now 3/10 separating him and Steba. It seems like he's a lot closer on this occasion. Now 2/10, and the next lap hasn't even begun as yet. Bambino sticking right behind Steba in the Alfa Romeo, trying to maximize his top speed through the slipstream, looking towards making a potential overtake heading into turn 1. Jaguar now currently in P4 heading into the pits, and unfortunately Bambino a bit too far back to maybe make the lunge, decides to stick back in P3 at the moment. Bide your time. There's no reason to make any sort of rushful decisions, and I'm sure Bambino knows this very, very clearly, being our championship leader at the moment. And now heading down towards the next potential overtaking spot. Unfortunately, once again, too far back to make the move. Actually, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. As we can see, the gap between Steba and Trems has also come down from 1.5 to 1.2 seconds. And Jaguar, after his pit stop, comes out in P5, right ahead of Saeed. Oh, we have a yellow flag in Sector 3. It is the McLaren of Przemu. Luckily for us, once again, no safety car. Oh, luckily, unluckily. That is debatable, but no safety car as of yet. Nikudza getting past Blurry, as we can see there on the timing sheets on the left. And Bambino not as close as he was a lap prior. 6/10 now separating him and Steba. However, that gap to P1 has come down once again to 1.2 seconds. It's actually gaining now. Trent seems to have used his battery on the straight. Bambino now very carefully trying to find the ideal line and get a perfect exit out of this corner, and a good exit is what he has gotten. However, it doesn't look like it's going to be good enough. Steba once again managing to retain P2, and now Jaguar getting past Alu, who did come into the pits for a pit stop himself. And Nikudza setting the fastest lap time of the race with a 1:24.8 as he promotes himself up into P6 after getting past Alu in the pits. Only 9 more laps left to go in the session, and Bambino has the big responsibility of not only getting past Steba and Trems, but also creating a 5-second gap to them. Oh, and Steba actually bolts right in for the pits, decides to come in for another pit stop that promotes Bambino up into P2, and now separating him and P1 is 1.7 seconds. It would be an absolute shame for Steba now if a safety car was to come out. And at a track like Portugal, you never really know. And only through a few corners, Bambino's brought that gap down from 1.7 to 1.4 seconds, as Jaguar gets the fastest time of the race with a 1:24.7. Jaguar also managing to get past Steba as well. Looked like it was a close exit for the Red Bull. It'll be interesting to see if he can hold off the Alfa Romeo for the remaining few laps. Meanwhile, Bambino trying to close that gap to Trems. There's a few more drivers have come into the pits. We can see Salmon and Blurry also switching on to a new set of inters, currently in P10 and P11 respectively. Bambino now through the straight has brought the gap down within a second. Over the course of the lap has been gaining on Trems at the moment. And neither driver has decided to come into the pits either. However, a conversation we were having earlier is if if Jaguar did manage to get past Steba, and he did, but Steba unfortunately going extremely widely on the exit of that corner there, and unfortunately picks up a 3-second time penalty, which is the last thing he would want to see for himself as he's so close to the end of the race. We have another yellow flag in Sector 2. It seems to be the McLaren once again, as Alu sets the fastest time of the race with a 1:24.5. And just as I was saying that, Steba actually is extremely close to Jaguar. I completely missed this. Now they're going side by side with each other. Steba around the outside does manage to get that grip. Only 2 laps fresher are his tires, and it worked for him. Steba manages to promote himself past Jaguar and promotes himself up into P3. I'm lucky I switched to that move right on time. I wasn't expecting him to catch up to him so quickly, but alas he has. And now, speaking of catching up, Bambino now only 4 tenths behind P1 at the moment. Steba obviously has 20 seconds to close the gap to Bambino. And that penalty is definitely not going to be helping him either. But with 4.5 tenths separating Bambino and Trems at the moment, let's take a look and right on board with Bambino as he is ever not really gaining on the straight. At least not on this occasion. Trems must have been using a bit of his battery to help keep that distance to the Mercedes. I mean, but just as much as that gap didn't close, Bambino brings it right back within a few corners. Hanging down to the next one, takes a peek down the inside line for just to maybe give a bit of a scare to Trems to force him into some sort of mistake. And now 2.5 tenths separating Bambino and Trems. As you ride on board with Bambino, he's basically pushing that Red Bull along, trying to get a better line through this corner, better traction. Fortunately can't do so at the moment. Trems maintaining P1. Extremely late braking there from Bambino. Luckily they avoid any sort of incident with each other. And now with that inside line, Bambino sees the potential to make a move on the race leader, and he sends it down the inside. Trems trying to fight this position back. He's still side by side with the Mercedes, but unfortunately has to concede at the moment. And now he's going to stick right behind the Mercedes to hopefully get him back right at the end of turn 1. But unfortunately, it looks like he had some sort of moment there and has lost 4 tenths to Bambino, who's now sending it through this corner, and now is most likely going to be using as much of his battery as he possibly can to make sure that he has that gap to Trems, who is now catching up to Bambino ever so slowly, brings that gap down to roughly 3 tenths. A move over there is never really over until the end of the second DRS straight, and now we can see riding on board with Trems as he's trying to close that gap to Bambino, unfortunately too far back. And it doesn't look like he has the traction to really keep up with him at the moment, as the gap has now increased to 6 tenths, and Bambino, it looks like, has securely moved himself up into P1. Alu and Saeed going side by side with each other. It looks like Saeed is going to let Alu go through, as Alu drops down into P6. Allows his teammate to maybe go for a potential run up ahead. And Bambino picks up a 3-second time penalty! With only 5 more laps left to go in this race, that has to be, 8 seconds worth of penalties for Bambino? Luckily for him, the gap to Steba is very, very significant, so even if the race ended where it is now, Bambino would be only finishing in P2. However, that does hurt to see, as that just means that he has to put in that much more energy and that much more effort to hopefully create a gap to Trems, which he has been doing pretty decently so far. Only has brought that gap up to roughly a second. And just as I say that, the gap coming straight back down to 7.5 tenths. Because currently in P5, also picking up a 3-second time penalty for track invalidations. You can see Alu, who was let through by his teammate Saeed, has actually massively gained on Nikudza as well. Nikudza obviously on 2-lap older tires as compared to Alu. And that gap has come crumbling down between both of them. 3/10, 4/10 now separating P6 and P5. Riding on board with Alu, he's significantly gaining on Nikudza, heading down towards the hairpin corner, sends it down the inside. They're side by side with each other, and unfortunately, it looks like Nikudza may have been sent a bit wide as there's a bit of contact between both drivers. Luckily, they both managed to avoid any sort of incident and spinning each other out. Alu manages to promote himself up into P5. Nikudza doesn't look to be done with him just as yet, though. Looks to be getting a better exit out of this corner and trying to keep up with Alu as much as he possibly can. Oh, and it looks like Alu has gone actually a bit wide through that corner there, and once again wide on the exit of this corner. Nikudza basically forcing him into some sort of mistakes and basically trying to force his nose in. Now with the inside line, once again trying to fight with the Alpine driver, and it does manage to work. Nikudza valiantly fought his way right back, and now has promoted himself up into P5, but Alu is not done with him just as yet. Once again, with the inside line, he manages to overtake Nikudza, and now the Haas and the Alpine driver fighting side by side with each other, heading down towards turn 1. Nikudza now, unfortunately, looks to be a bit too far back to maybe make a lunge into turn 1. However, if he can keep this gap close, we may be looking at another overtaking opportunity at the end of the second DRS zone. I had to hold my breath through that corner there as it looked like he was about to send it into the rear end of Alu. Luckily, he does manage to avoid that. And now we can see Nikudza trying to keep as stable of a line as he possibly can, heading towards this hairpin corner. He is quite far back, so will he send it down the inside? No, he will not. Decides to be patient with it, as there is a yellow flag in Sector 3, and it seems to be Blurry, who's unfortunately had some sort of moment there. At least I would think that's Blurry. Yes, it is. Just had to make sure. But great driving between Alu and Nikudza, who has now unfortunately dropped down into P6, and Alu's been promoted up into P5. Only 2 more laps left to go in the session, and we can see Bambino has a 2.2 second gap to Trems, and 9.3 second, and Trems having a 9.3 second gap to Steba. So yeah, we can see that the gap to the leader is roughly 11.6 seconds at the moment. Steva is going to be wanting to bring that down to roughly 8 seconds if he's looking to get past Bambino at the end of the race through penalties. Oh no, but Steva has penalties of his own. I just completely missed that. Steva himself has 3 seconds worth of penalties. Damn. And Nikudza 3.5 tenths now behind Alu. Action has really picked up here in the final few laps here at the Portuguese Grand Prix. Nikudza trying his level best, however he is a bit squirrely on the exit of that corner. 5 tenths now separating him and Alu. Not much time left in the session. Steba, obviously on the much faster compounded tires, has significantly closed the gap to Steba. However, the gap to Bambino still looks to be roughly 11 seconds. Or maybe 9 now, as a matter of fact. 9-10 seconds. The rain has been pouring hard throughout this entire race, but we are now on to the penultimate lap here at the Portuguese Grand Prix. Not much more time left for a lot of these drivers now. We can see the gap to the leader very, very quickly if we get the chance to. Yeah, so at the moment, Steva roughly 10 seconds behind Bambino, and obviously Bambino with his 8-second penalty and Steva with his 30-second penalty. He has still a significant more amount of time to gain on the championship leader if he's looking to beat him in this race, at least based on time. And we can see Nikudza only 4.5 tenths behind Alu. This is one of the closest battles out on track at the moment. We can see Samet now coming into a battle with Zabs and actually getting the move done relatively quickly and promoting himself up into P9. Oh, and it looks like Zab's actually not done with Samet just as yet either. They're both side by side heading down into the hairpin corner. I'm surprised Zab didn't just send it down the inside as he was only a tenth behind Samet at the moment, but stays in P10. I would have most definitely, if that was me, I would have most definitely sent a move. But then again, it's a good thing it's not me because I would have probably taken out half the grid at this point. But we are now on the final lap here of the. We are now on the final lap of the Portuguese Grand Prix. It's been it's been a roller coaster of a race to say for sure. The latter half of the race seemingly being a lot more interesting than the first half. The gap to Bambino now being 8 seconds for Steba. And this is now the point where a lot of these drivers are going to be making some dangerous lunges to do absolutely anything to get past each other. So I want to make sure that I ride on board with Nikudza at least till the end of the second straight to make sure that I don't miss any extremely late lunges from him. And no, it doesn't look like he's going to be making any extremely late lunges. A bit way too far back on this occasion to make any sort of overtakes. But you can't really take away from what was an overall a fantastic race from Bambino. If you are just joining us at the moment, then we should take a look at the positions gained. Yeah, look at that. So Bambino obviously gaining 11 positions through the course of this race, starting off near the end of the grid and coming out after 33 laps to win the Grand Prix has been a fantastic performance for him. Bambino crosses the line and wins the Portuguese Grand Prix. Trends, on the other hand, is going to have to come across the line, and unfortunately, because of Bambino's penalty, actually loses the win. And Trends comes across the line and actually ends up winning the race. Steba, unfortunately, just misses out on getting past Bambino as well on time and comes across the line, finishes in P3. Jaguar in P4. Alu in P5. It doesn't look like I don't think Nikudza is. I think Nikudza has enough of a gap to not really have to worry about how much time he's gonna lose out on after he crosses the line. But a fantastic race regardless. So Trems comes across the line to win the race. Bambino in P2, Steba in P3, Jaguar in P4, Alu in P5, Nikudza in P6. Said comes across the line and finishes in P7. Jack Kings will most likely be coming across the line and finishing in P8, Samet in P9, and most likely Zab in P10. Wow, okay. That was an interesting race. I think the second half was definitely a lot more entertaining than the first. No safety cars, very surprisingly. We had a few incidents where a few of the drivers went off prominently the McLaren drivers who obviously had a very rough weekend. The Red Bull drivers who were obviously hoping for a potential 1-2 will have to do with a 1-4 at the moment. Right then, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be all from me and here in Tier 2. We've had a very exciting race as hopefully you all get to join us at the next weekend as we head to the United States for the Texas Grand Prix. Should be a very exciting race over there as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in to Tier 2, and I hope to see you all at the next weekend.